Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. Hey, we actually had a big trade, the trade we've been waiting for a while. It finally happened, and we'll discuss all the intricacies of that deal in a little bit. But as always, we start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so just getting caught up from the weekend stuff. I had a softball tournament, so I didn't get to watch the Football Hall of Fame. Well, it's fun, Mike. Football Hall.
I was just doing a swing.
Yeah. Football Hall of Fame inductions, and so a couple Jets went in, but I'm just getting through the Joe Klecko, and what's interesting about Joe Klecko is there's very few athletes that are actually well liked in New York and Philly, and Tug McGraw is one, and Joe Klecko is the other. And the interesting thing is and I probably didn't know this at the time, is really how intertwined Philly and New York were in regards to Klecko. Like I didn't know he didn't have a scholarship at all. I didn't. He went and played semi-pro ball. I didn't know that. But I did know he went to Temple, but I didn't know how he went to Temple. And the guy from Temple saw him play 1 quarter of semi-pro ball and went and told his coach, "You should go get this guy." And then the reason he got drafted is, I knew some of this, but I didn't know all of this. Like Walt Michaels was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, and he was the Jets coach the year they were drafting Klecko. And he's like, "Listen, I saw this guy play at the Vet, and if he could survive that and do really well, we want this guy on our team." And it's funny. So he holds up his speech, and he goes, "This has been in my drawer for 30 years. Since 1993, Joe Klecko had his Hall of Fame speech in his drawer, and he finally got to use it." It's pretty good. You feel good for the guy. You see him up there, and it's like his fingers are all mangled. He's an all-pro at 3 different positions, and and he's talking about his teammates. But he did get me thinking. There was this one game where and it was nice for Jets fans, where the Jets beat Miami in '86. Ken O'Brien had 500 and something yards passing. Wesley Walker caught 4 touchdowns in that game. I watched that in a hotel I was working in. My boss was a Miami fan. I was a Jets fan, and we basically did not work that day. We went in a room and we watched this game together, and it was an unbelievable shootout. But it got me thinking. I looked up Wesley Walker, and I'm going to have to say, he's got 71 touchdowns in 154 games. In that era, it's a lot. And I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm hoping maybe someday they give him consideration, because he was an all-pro a bunch of times, led the league once, but also, hit 1,000 yards like 2 or 3 times. That's all. It was fun to watch Klecko, and even someone like Anthony would remember him probably going to Temple and being talked about even in Temple.
Yeah, it was talked about. I mean, I did work near the athletic department at Temple University, and Klecko certainly was one of the key, I would say, figures you would see, of course, as part of at the sports complex as an NFL player during an era when there wasn't a lot of Temple players going to the National Football League, and now you see you've seen in more recent years many more players. So in a lot of ways, Joe Klecko is a trailblazer for Temple L football. So absolutely, it's
people from Temple were at his induction too in Canton, which was nice.
Well, just quickly, because I know people want us to get to the trade stuff, but Kev, is there one player that you watched growing up or watched as an adult that is not in the Hall of Fame, in the Football Hall of Fame, because for me, it's Steve Tasker from the Bills. He's going to have a trouble getting in because he was mostly a special teams guy, but he was the best special teams guy for about 6 or 7 years and is widely regarded, but I'm not sure about him getting in the Hall of Fame. What about you?
Well, it's a great question. There's not one that comes to mind, but I actually did have a question that I wanted to send to Russ, because it's just something I felt, but I could be completely wrong in this, but it's always been my sense that for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like the Football Hall of Fame has the same importance as the Baseball Hall of Fame and even the Hockey Hall of Fame. Like, it just seems more random, it just feels like there's no rhyme or reason to guys getting. It's just
there's a lot more always put in every year.
Right?
No, but it's true. I will say this. I think I was there 7-8 years ago, and they just then started to just throw like stupid NFL money into it, because my big problem with the Hall of Fame when I went there was, I said it to a friend, Mike, that that Anthony knows, Mike Del Tufo. We were both there, and I said, "There's not many footballs in the Football Hall of Fame. Like, this guy carried this football in for a touchdown. This is a football from Super Bowl, whatever. There weren't that many, and it was just that struck me as like, how do you have a sport that doesn't have that? Now, of course, since then they're building, and they still haven't really gotten around to it, but they're building more hotels around it. It's all very late, Kev. Like the baseball had all this baked in very early. They even had hotels around it early. And the same with the hockey. It's in like the heart of the city. Yeah. Honestly, the Football Hall of Fame is in the middle of nowhere. Like Ohio's in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, yeah, but it's not even the brick structure. Just overall how people feel about it.
I think that is where it ranks. And they're throwing money at it, and they're trying to kind of give it more gravitas. But also, what Mike said's true. When you got 7, 8 guys going in every year, it's like it's a lot.
Yeah, it's hard. But I'll tell a story that kind of speaks to maybe one of the issues. I don't know if it's still the same, but when I was on the Hockey Hall of Fame committee, the sports there at USA Today decided that he really didn't want me on that because the number of people who select the members of the Hall of Fame was at 18. And he just thought that it was too few a number, that we had too much influence. And he just didn't think it was a good look for a journalist to be a part of it. Now, my question at the time was, well, doesn't football have a committee approach? And he said, because Jarrett, who was our NFL writer, was on that committee. I knew he was. And he goes, yes, but they have 36. And somehow he thought that 36 seemed like a lot. And to me, it does. Like, first of all, how in the world do you have a committee with 36 people on it? Like, either you have it like baseball, where every voting member votes, or you have a select committee like we have. I don't think 36 works.
Well, they go like team. Was it team, but like someone from each NFL city was.
I don't think so, but I don't know. And again, I don't know whether they still use that. I have no idea. But
I do think they may have writers from each city because Klecko did single out a couple of New York writers. So, and I think in essence, those are the guys that end up trumpeting the local guys.
I think they do because I remember like with Tasker, like Vic Carucci, who's a longtime writer,
right?
Worked for NFL.com, now works for the Buffalo News. He was the one who made the overture for Tasker. So let's get started, though. I'm sorry. I'm sure everybody wants us to talk about the deal. Go ahead, Ek.
We got some stuff. Okay. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, August 7th, 2022. 3.
I'm Michael Agello. I know what year it is, and I hate weeds.
I'm Anthony Mingioni. Okay.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I didn't realize that we have taken the time-space continuum has taken us back to 2022, but it has.
Kevin Allen, Detroit Hockey Now.
And I'm Mac Lynn. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast with HockeyBuzz.com. My wife's allergic to weeds, Mike, so I get your pain. I have to weed all the time. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. Not every Monday through Friday. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the summer. But usually we're Monday through Friday.
We feel like it.
Whenever we can do it. Whenever we can all make it in the summer. But we'll be back in regular world soon. But let's get past that because we do have something good to talk about and something fun to talk about. And finally, the Erik Karlsson saga is over. This is like the second Erik Karlsson saga because when he got traded to San Jose, that was also an Erik Karlsson saga.
I'm sure there'll be another one soon, but anyway.
Too. And the Penguins, who were the only team with an average age over 30 at the end of last year in the NHL, by the way, have added 5 30-plus-year-old players in the offseason. And but Kevin, what are your thoughts? Do you like this?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it from the Penguins' perspective. They didn't give up nearly what everybody said they were going to have to give up.
Yeah.
And, I saw some people on Twitter just summed up what my initial thoughts were. They had a list of 4 players they wanted to get rid of. And they wanted to do that even beyond, trying to get Karlsson. Right. And they did all that, and they got Karlsson. And they're paying, $10 million or whatever it is. And they only gave up a first-round pick and a second-round pick. I think this is a heck of a trade. Kyle Dubas understands what his mandate was. He didn't really have any options. This is not a guy that could announce, hey, we're going to rebuild. We're going to rebuild on the fly. That's not his mandate. His mandate is to win now. Erik Karlsson is a player that fits into that strategy And I thought it was a big day for them, and I thought it was a big day for Montreal as well. Already they're talking about Montreal Hockey Now's Mark Dumont, who's pretty wired in and really understands what the philosophy is. The Canadians said they're already talking about, the possibility of moving Petrie again. Pittsburgh retained 25% of his salary. That gets him down to $469. Montreal will retain a little bit more. Now all of a sudden, Petrie goes from a guy that's really difficult to trade to being a guy that's desirable. If they can get him down to 2.5, they can move him and get another asset. So I liked it. And San Jose, even though they didn't get as much as originally they want, they got enough there that they're going to be okay about it. The only problem is they have taken some players that come with some baggage. So it'll be interesting to see how they fit.
Well, most of them are on short term in terms of how much commitment they have to them.
Yeah, and I think that was Anthony. I think that was the key here was the fact that, we knew that Greer didn't want to take long term. So there were players out there that were rumored to go to San Jose, and he didn't want either. He didn't want the player, or he didn't want the term of the player. I look at this, and I think it's a great missed opportunity for Greer. He didn't stick to his guns like Joe Sakic did in the Matt Duchene deal a few years ago. He only got 1 first-round pick instead of 2. Now, that may have been floated out there to raise the price. But really, what did he get? Mike Hoffman has got a year left. He's a decent forward, but he's not the player he was a few years ago when he was with Ottawa. You might be able to flip him at the deadline, and if you retain salary. Granlund is the player that got Ron Hextall fired. That deal was a bad deal. It was a bad fit. He was another $5 million contract. Everybody got pissed off. He got fired. Ruta, I scratched my head because I said Ruta was like the Matt Carl of Tampa Bay. He was playing with Victor Hedman, and when he went to Pittsburgh, he turned into Jan Ruta. He's not a very
heard a lot.
So I mean, I don't get the deal from the Greer perspective because they really didn't get.
I do.
Yeah,
come on, Mike. It's
no,
Mike
no,
for you.
I know it's the 4 years. I get that. I know you had to get rid of that deal, but you didn't get much back. And I think it's a grand slam home run for Dubas for the next couple of years. But this team is
in the short term. I would agree with that. I would say in the immediate term, I agree with that. Long term, we've seen this before. We've seen this where a team is loaded up on players. The key thing with Pittsburgh is how much there's concern, I think, with depth. They get hit with injuries.
There's always that
out really quick for them.
I look at it. Yeah, I think Dubas played some chess in the sense that if they're mostly healthy, you probably could have Letang and Karlsson for at least 2 more years of good play, and that's their window. I think that's their window for them to be a legit contender. I think Jarry will snap back. I'm not that worried about Jarry. I know.
What is their backup goaltending situation now? They moved out the Smith.
Nedeljkovic.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion,
hold on. But I was going to say on the San Jose part, listen, they got rid of all those years of Karlsson's salary. They're not going to be good the next 2 years anyhow. But like, what is the big difference? Everybody's like, they set him back 10 years. No, he set him back 2 years, which they were going to be set back anyhow. But he's putting them in better financial situation. The team that I think only marginally did better was Montreal, because honestly, Montreal at some point has to stop being a clearinghouse and start being an NHL franchise. And I don't know when they're going to do that.
Yeah, and San Jose could recoup some draft picks by flipping those guys at a later time. I mean, making Hoffman into a $2 million player at the deadline, or doing the same thing with Granlund after the season. They might be able to get second, third round picks, but they didn't get what everybody thought they were going to get, which was at least 2 first rounders, and they didn't even get first round equivalents. It's not like they got guys who were like in their early 20s who were first round picks. My problem with Pittsburgh, and like I said, you're right, Russ. I mean, the specter of Letang and Karlsson, if they stay healthy, along with Malkin and Crosby and Gensel and all the players that they have, they could be really good. It's going to make the Eastern Conference really difficult. My big question with Pittsburgh, as it has always been, is the goaltending. If Jarry stays healthy, if he stays consistent, they could be a Stanley Cup contender. But I haven't seen that from that guy, so I doubt whether it can happen.
I am not disagreeing with you on Jarry, Mike, at all. I am I am disagreeing that Pittsburgh hit this one out of the park. I think that the kind of the elephant in the room with Erik Karlsson is first of all, obviously there were not many teams that could take him. And like we've talked about that all along, right? And then also he's a very specific player to a very specific system. And, Edmonton and Pittsburgh are two teams that probably could make that work, but there aren't many other teams that could. I mean, I talked to a GM who said this to me. He said, and I thought it was really interesting. He said, if you were going to the NHL right now, you're playing against the best team from Mars, he said. You're taking your top players. Is Erik Karlsson one of your top 6 defensemen? And he said, he's not one of mine. Like if I'm going to a game, if I'm going into a situation like that right now, he's like, I'm not taking Erik Karlsson. He's very specific. He does one thing. He does
top 6 in the league.
No, if you're putting a team together right now, you're putting your team because the difference. Obviously, single-handedly, individually skilled.
If I'm putting a team together for 10 years, no, he's not in my top 6. If I'm putting a team together for 2 years, he's in my top 6.
If you're putting a team together for this summer, right
Yes.
now.
He's in my top 6.
No, he's in my top 6.
He's in your top 6, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, nobody in the league can get 100 points, but
Right.
but does he get 100
that's
points
simple.
He's a puck
anywhere else?
rusher.
I mean, like,
I don't know. I don't know how good Mars' team is.
no, I know, but
He's
pretty
a
good in
puck.
the red.
He's
Pretty good in the red zone. But besides that,
He's got a specific skill set. He's a puck rusher. He's a great power play
Right.
quarterback. All those things. He's top end.
but you gotta protect him. Like if he's my guy
No,
said,
you don't have to protect him. He has
If
the
my-
puck.
No,
Right.
but when you're defensively, you can't use him in certain situations. He says in certain situations you can't use him. He's going to help you. But if you're assuming your Mars team is as good as you are, and they've got some top forwards, they've got their own Connor McDavid, they've got their own whatever.
I mean, don't
They're
you
gonna
tell
come at
yourself? Don't you tell yourself though, Eck, that if Erik Karlsson is my 4th best defenseman, I'm pretty good. Because he's you play him at 4, so he doesn't match up against.
Teams want to have
Sure, yeah, no, on a regular
at least
NHL
4
team,
good
yes.
days, and that's the key there. If he can be
No,
part of
but
that
is
team.
he? He's not in your top 4 for sure.
Yes, he is. Because if
that-
you-
Yeah. Oh
if you
no.
take
Yeah.
away- If you take away those San Jose years, the 3 before last year, where he wasn't great, he was getting 60, 70 points a year.
Well,
So why all of a sudden do I not think he's going to get 70 points now?
Well, we're okay.
Especially now.
Remember when he was at his apex? He was playing with a defensive defenseman like Mark Mathot, who was tough, who stayed at home, and who covered for him when he went up the ice with the puck. You look at Pittsburgh right now. Do they put Ryan Graves, a lefty, alongside Karlsson? Do they put Marcus Pettersson? Another. I think he's a lefty.
I can see Pettersson. Pettersson, I think, is very likely.
He didn't have anybody next to him last year.
Right, but it didn't matter, Russ, because San Jose sucked. It didn't matter.
Well, it mattered in the sense that you're still putting up points in the NHL.
Right, no.
Meaningless points. Listen, meaningless points in meaningless games on a team where he was allowed to have the puck as much as he wanted it.
Right.
Okay, and he's now in a situation where he's on a team where he's not going to be allowed to have the puck as much as he wants it.
Okay,
I think he's going to adapt. Let's put it this way.
But if you're applying that logic, then every defenseman on a meaningless team should have 100 points a year.
No. I'm not debating that he's a phenomenal player. I'm just saying he's not. In my opinion, I'm really, really seriously do not think. And I asked another assistant GM the same question because I thought it was interesting. This GM says absolutely. There's no way he would be in my top 6. Because of the fact that you're putting a team together to win against another team that's very good offensively at the same time. You have other guys who are very good offensively, maybe not Karlsson good offensively, but way better defensively than Karlsson is. So you're talking about, if Karlsson's a 10, you've got guys who are 9s and 8s who are 9s and 8s and defensively as well, where Karlsson's a 2.
But
I mean, what you're arguing, Eck, is something you cannot really be argued. I mean, every time we see an Olympic team, it always comes down to how the pieces fit together. What you're saying is that there are guys that are saying, I would rather have 8 different pieces without Karlsson in it. I accept that. I'm just saying, to suggest that Karlsson as a 100-point scorer does not fit into a top 8 in terms of the premium players is just ludicrous. But I do understand what your argument though. That
I don't think it's ludicrous. I think it's all. Obviously this is all philosophical or what have you. And there's the concept of in the NHL we have players who are very good individually, incredible individually, but this is also a sport where if you're not incredibly team or if you're not a team player, you're also We see that. We see teams. We see individuals get knocked out and not make the playoffs. We see teams go really far. This is a weird sport that way. And to sit there and say, okay, on an individual one-on-one, Karlsson versus anybody else, just like one-on-one hockey, shinny or whatever you want to play it, I'll take Karlsson all the time. He's got crazy skills. He's got crazy things. But will he be able – but when you're actually trying to put a team together, he's going to have to just – I'm sure he can, Anthony. I'm not saying he can't.
He played in a system in Ottawa with a defenseman who is a good complement. I think he can do that again with Sullivan as the coach, with the support that they have. The concern I have, and I don't remember who mentioned it, is the depth on that defense. You look right now, Karlsson, Letang, Graves, and Pettersson, those are your top four. Not bad. Then P.O. Joseph, who really hasn't established himself, Chad Ruedel, who's a borderline NHLer, same with Mark Friedman, Ty Smith, who has been a failure since they made that deal. I mean, they've got some work to do. I mean, yes, you can find bottom pairing guys for league minimum salary, but they're right up against it right now.
Any team that's got $20 million tied up in their top two defensemen, Mike, is going to have that problem. Like, there's
it's not 20.
Well, whatever. It's close.
It's 16. Yeah.
16. Okay. If you've got 16 tied up in your top two defensemen, you're going to have depth issues. There's just no way getting around that.
Yeah. I agree.
I don't agree with that, but
okay, Mike, tell me why. Come and tell me why.
Well, it's because 16 million. I mean, everybody has 3 or 4 players that they're spending a lot of money on.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way the system works.
Well, for sure, but usually they're not. No team has 2 defensemen like this.
I don't know. I'd have to look. I mean, that doesn't seem reasonable. I mean,
we certainly can't say every team has this. I mean, this is not.
No, it's not. But let's go back to whether Karlsson fits. If the Erik Karlsson had played for the Vegas Golden Knights, would they not have won the Stanley Cup?
No, they very well might have won the Stanley Cup. I mean, we don't know.
Well, I'm just saying he can adapt. I mean,
he can adapt, but.
Yeah, he can.
Listen, I wanted Karlsson to go to Edmonton. I wanted Karlsson to go to Pittsburgh. I'm happy. It's going to be thrilling and fun and exciting from a perspective of fans. It's going to be great.
Well,
but just to expect that the sum of the parts is going to be equal to what you would think they are, I don't know. Brett Burns with Karlsson and Brett Burns was different than Karlsson without Brett Burns. Right. There's an issue there. There's an issue there, and now he's got Letang. Letang wants the puck a lot too. Like, he's not a guy who's going to say
they're going to be on the same. They're not going to say they're going to be on the same pairing. I don't think they will be. It will be. I think it would be a mistake for the Penguins to do.
I don't think they will be either. I think they'll be on the same power play.
Letang has changed his game over the years. But what you can count on is Letang and Karlsson will be out there for 24 minutes a game each if they're healthy.
Yeah.
Right, they will for sure, but also the Penguins are not a good defensive team. Let's put that right up. Like, offense, the forwards aren't good defensively. They lost a couple guys that in Rodriguez, even guys who I thought were the better defensive players who are gone. They're going to have to be better defensive. They've got goaltending issues as well. We talked about this. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here with Pittsburgh.
Well, okay, two things that are to me are very interesting and that'll play out during the season. I think, remember, Pittsburgh only missed the playoffs by a couple 3 points. I think that Karlsson and what they've done and the additions that they've made in free agency have elevated them into the mix of the playoffs. So now, it's the Eastern Conference is going to be much tougher to break the top 8 than the West. I think the Eastern Conference. I mean, you've got 5-6 teams easily in the Atlantic Division, and I think you have 4. I think it's an 11 to 12 team race for 8 spots, and that's going to make it very difficult. Now, the other thing from my perspective that was interesting is the fact that this is the move that Kyle Dubas wanted to make in Toronto, and he got turned down. This is the little germ that the little thing that blew up into why he ended up leaving Toronto. He wanted to make certain deals. This was one idea. He got turned down by Shanahan. He got turned down by the board. He wanted more autonomy, and when he couldn't get the autonomy, he got let go. This is one of the reasons why he ended up not being in Toronto. I don't think this move in Toronto would have worked. In Pittsburgh, it might.
That's fine, but I want to just go back to Jerry and this getting washed over like he's not a good goalie or he's an average goalie. Twice he's been in the top 10 for the Vezina. The last time was 2 years ago. His career save percentage is .914. We're not talking about a mediocre goaltender here. We're not.
It's health.
I'm not questioning his abilities at all. Like I really like him a lot.
You guys kind of did a little bit.
No, what I'm questioning, Russ, is that he's going to be facing is his injury proneness, and he's going to be facing a lot of shots.
Okay,
He's
that's
facing
fair.
a ton of shots, and he's going to have to move a lot. Like he's not talking about a goalie who can sit there, but he's good at moving. He's a great side to side. He's incredible side to side. I mean, I think he's a great goalie, but beyond him, we all talked about like we didn't know who their backup was. Kevin did, but no one else knew. So I mean, the reality is like they've got to do that. There's things they're going to have to do here.
Yeah, but they also have guys. Crosby knows that. There's players that know that. They don't have to be a perfect defensive team. They have to make it into the playoffs. Once they make it to the playoffs, then you still have to fear this team because of who they have on the team.
Okay. We'll see. Hopefully,
things are okay there.
That was the grandkids, I'm sure.
Or chupacabras, perhaps. Anyway, no, to me, listen, I mean, this is going to make, and obviously the Eastern Conference continues to get the stars. I mean, this is a star. The stars are all getting traded to the East. It's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
you get past like Colorado, the stars are all in the East, but it's really something else. That's just, but they have to compete in the East. Like this is the thing they have to be able to.
I mean, it's still going to be. Yeah. I do agree. Even after this move has happened, and I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly the NHL's excited, ESPN's excited, TNT's excited. That I'm certainly from their perspective, it's fantastic.
I mean, they're going to be like the greatest show on ice type thing. They're going to be fun to watch. They're going to be like a circus show coming to town. Everyone's going to want to go see them play. Like even if you're a Flyers fan and you don't want to go see the Flyers next year, you're going to go see the Penguins play because it's going to be a fun game. You're going to get to see the magic that they put out there.
But if they get into a first-round series against the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes,
they're screwed.
It's
kind of screwed. I mean, that's the reality. Is like this is
that is the concern once we get into the postseason. And again, my biggest concern for Pittsburgh is that I feel like they've been core. The depth is really gone. The depth has gotten fairly thin. They're very, very top heavy now. And if it works out, great. It's fun. It's going to be fun to watch, but if they get any kind of a rash of injuries during the season, granted, the goaltending.
They have a lot of guys on defense, though, Ant. They may not all be stars, but they do have depth.
No, they do. But I'm concerned about some other spots for them as well. But yeah, certainly, I think this is as good a spot for Karlsson as he could probably hope to be.
No, for Karlsson personally, yes.
Yes.
Like this, Edmonton, Toronto, all three of those teams. Like he's a quarterback who needs receivers, right? And he's got the receivers that he's going to pay. Like he's going to be able to feed these guys. And Edmonton, Toronto, and Pittsburgh had those guys. Those super receivers you could feed and get. And he's going to set. You're going to see breakaway after breakaway after breakaway in certain situations. Especially if he had gone to like be with McDavid or somebody of that speed, it would have been crazy to watch Karlsson and McDavid. I really wanted to see that because I thought that would be because Karlsson's one of the best outlet passers we've ever had, and he's just to watch him the way he leads guys on the breakaways. He sets up a lot of breakaways. Like that's something he does. Pittsburgh doesn't quite have the speed necessarily, but they have the skill. They are, I want to something out with Dubas.
I was just going to point out, like Poulin's getting close. So if they had injuries, he would come up. Pustonen came up for a game. He had 60 points in the AHL, and so he kind of came out of nowhere. So they do have a few guys they can call up. So that's why I'm not overly concerned. If it's for like half a season, sure, then I'm concerned.
What were you saying about Dubas?
So here's the thing with Dubas. All right, he goes in there and the first thing he says, he sits down with obviously he sits down with Crosby, right? He talks to Crosby,
right?
And that's pretty much. I'm not saying Dubas is starstruck by Crosby or anything like that, but you get the impression that it's still a pretty cool person to talk to, right?
Sidney Crosby, at the end of the day.
Sidney Crosby, you're a GM, you're not that much older than him, if at all. You're sort of sitting there and he's Sidney Crosby, and he's telling you, listen, if you come here, we need to win now. He's going to say that to him, and because players, this is a player's trade. This is a trade that the players wanted him to make. Like if you're the player, there's no question that the players
make it too.
I think
Coach, right. So you're right. All those things are true. All those things are true, Russ, and we talk about this all the time. Like, and you kind of argue my side here that this is what I'm saying here when I say that this is not. And I'm not trying to slam Pittsburgh because my Flyers fan. Crying out loud, guys. I've been. People are saying that in the chat room. I've been like I've been claimed to be a Pittsburgh fan by Flyers fans forever. The reality is I like the Penguins a lot. But the thing here is Dubas, did he feel like intimidated to do this trade? Like, did he feel like he had to make this deal?
Well,
I mean,
this is the thing. And this is why I said Pittsburgh I didn't think was the greatest job for him, because he walks into a situation where he has to win now based on the fact that his core group is in their mid-30s. He went into this with eyes wide open. So this is an all-in deal because he knows that he wouldn't have taken – I'm sure Fenway Sports – and Sullivan and everybody let him know before this, you were going to have to win, and you can't come in here and, and play your analytics stuff or try to, get drafted or bring in college free agents and do the slow build like he tried to do in Toronto around the core group. You've got to win now. So this was a win now move. He moved out salary with Petrie that I think was a bad contract. Granlund was a bad contract. He takes on Hoffman and filters them through to San Jose. Yeah, this is clearly a now move.
And he didn't give up really anything, to be honest.
You're right. Petrie was, you had to get clear Petrie's salary to make Karlsson viable. You gladly give away Granlund. You give up.
He really got Karlsson for virtually nothing except for the cap space. The cap space is where that's what he gave up with.
From that pure position, that's why this ultimately the deal is a win for Pittsburgh. Let's just call for that as you acquired a Norris Trophy level candidate, at least based off of the numbers.
Yes.
Again, that first round pick. Again, if we start getting into the picks and everything for Pittsburgh, that's when it starts getting.
I'm a little surprised that pick was top 10 protected.
No, not necessarily.
No, I'm not surprised.
That's driving a bargain. You
have to do what you have to do. They're not going to accept it protected when they're not getting 2. So I think that's probably that had to be that way. I also think
the top 10 protected is worse for San Jose, right? I mean, am I wrong about that?
It is, but it's still a first round pick at the end of the day.
Well, first round pick. So I would think San Jose would be able to get that without the protection if they're not getting 2. That's my point.
They would have gotten that in other. That's
I get what you're saying.
But they were gunning for it. No question. Doesn't mean that's what
I never thought they were going to get 2, but I didn't think that they would be in a protected situation. And I guess the situation is what it goes to the next year, and that's not protected or whatever.
But the other thing is Pittsburgh also had a pretty good draft, so it's like they did change people for that as well. Mm-hmm. Just having Dubas there helped them. They got a potential star in Braden Yeager, so it's like you could call this a now team, and they've got a 2-year window. But they are going to do things behind the scenes, and they will do some of those other things Mike said that will start to work the back end. That's where Hextall really didn't do a lot. He didn't do much at all.
But that wasn't something that could be at the top of his agenda.
No.
He needed to make the big move to help that core group out in the next couple of years to get them over the top, because those were his marching orders when he took that job. He knew. Great. He got 7 years. He got how many $1 million. He got complete autonomy that he didn't have in Toronto. But he went in with the marching orders that you got to make this team the best that they can be, while Crosby and Malkin can still do something. And that's
Kevin. What I was saying to these guys was the fact that I felt like Dubas was not bullied into this, but basically, when he sat down with Crosby, sat down with all these other guys, he knows that he's got to make a deal for now. These players want a deal for now. And he makes a deal for now. He doesn't give up anything really, which is impressive, except for the draft pick. But he definitely this feels like a player's trade to me. All those players, of course, want Karlsson on their team because you're betting on a player wants the best players on his team. Once he gets there, it's going to be a different situation as far as how that's going to work out. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. First of all, for those who were wondering, we just had a battle royale of 2 dogs who neither of which belonged to me visiting our home.
I knew that was a dog.
And it was like a Texas.
It was a dog-eat dog.
No, it was not. It was like a Texas match. And my wife was like, the linesman had to break up Probert. It was
versus May.
It was. I got in just in time to see the end, and Terry had already broken it up. But
that's impressive on her part, man.
Yeah, it is. But she did use a rug because he's a very smart person. So they were not. Neither dog was happy.
No newspapers.
No. There was no dog was injured though. That's the good
very
thing.
Good. No kids were involved.
Anyway, so going back to that, I think Kyle Dubas knew what he was getting into. I mean, Mike made a good point that he had tried to do this before, and that leads it back to my other argument. Obviously, he feels differently than your GM because he feels you can win a cup by blending in Karlsson because he tried to do it in Toronto and they were close to the cup. And right. I think that he thinks he can do it here. But I think the mandate here is strong. And one of the things that's really not mentioned that a general manager mentioned to me, and this was prior to the trade being made, about, no one ever considers the idea that, San Jose is giving up a major attraction for its team. Like people come to see Erik Karlsson play.
Yeah.
And the Penguins now are getting a guy that assures, like they're like number one in like a lot of things financially. Like, their revenue streams are high, and this is a corporation that owns them. And you don't think they like the possibility? I mean, the bringing in a guy like Karlsson that just assures that they're going to be a team, and the Karlsson jersey sales and all that. I think that's all part of it.
And also, Kevin, I mean, there's a little bit of also the Premier, almost like the Premier League mindset as well. I mean, like they're treating this thing like it's Liverpool or Manchester City here in acquiring as much high-end talent as they can because they know it's a massive selling point.
Yeah. And, the idea to have the Norris Trophy winner to play with Malkin and Crosby, all of that works. But I do think Dubas believes that this can work. In fact, there aren't a lot of players like, Mike rattled off a pretty pedestrian group of defensemen that they're going to have to deal with. But, it doesn't matter when you got, the high-end talent at the top in terms of, the fan base. So the 32 teams, like the chances of winning, are not great for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they're not great for anyone. It's just it's hard to win.
Here's what I'm going to answer to the chat room, though, Kev. The chat room was asking, does anybody believe they're a Stanley Cup threat? I do believe it. They didn't miss the playoffs last year.
Yeah,
and now
if it lines up well for them, absolutely.
You tell me a top seed in the Eastern Conference that wants to face Pittsburgh with that firepower. Right. If they're all healthy going into the playoffs, no chance I would want to face them.
Well, I remember in the 90s writing this specific sentence, and I think it applies to the Penguins. If they get in the playoffs, they could win the playoffs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like they're not, because of their depth, they're not the best team in the league. That's not even close. But they have guys that, are difference makers that, are beyond description. But, Vegas will tell us for sure, but I haven't even looked what their odds are, but I can't imagine they're in the top five.
I think they were in the top five, but
were they? Well, I'm actually surprised at that. So
yeah. No, I wanted to bring this up because, and I don't think one was attached to the other, but like literally minutes after the Karlsson deal was announced, Arizona announced the signing of Matt Dumba on a 1-year deal, and they're two completely different players. But I wonder, Ek, whether this, there are a number of defensemen out there, Noah Hannafin, well, for one, whether everything was waiting on the Karlsson deal to happen before the floodgates open, and we see moves before training camp of players who are like in limbo with a year left in their contracts, like Hannafin.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a degree to that. Like I do think that the Nylander's the other domino out there, right? And I think that those, we've talked about them obviously ad nauseum now. But, I think that the reality is, that I heard, Hannafin for Nylander and over the weekend. I heard that. I put that out there as and it would be like there's other players involved, but those would be the central parts of the.
Well, it's funny because we had Julian McKenzie from the Athletic on our Off the Post show, and he covers Calgary. And I was just jokingly saying, well, because right now Hannafin's got a year left in his contract and he wants to play in the U.S. Nylander wants $10 million. The Leafs can't afford him. The Leafs, I think, need to upgrade on defense. Calgary may need to upgrade, offensively because of all the players that they've lost over the last little while. It does make sense if both teams recognize that they're not going to be able to sign these players long term. That's where I think it is. I'm convinced, I know other people push back on this, that the Leafs will not go into the regular season with Nylander unsigned to a long-term contract. I think it's either he gets signed or he is traded before the season. They're not going to go to the once, they're not going to trade him as a rental going into the deadline because they're going to be in the playoff race. So you're trading him before the season or you're signing him. One of the
I talked to somebody who a GM who's had like brief discussions about Nylander, not like anything serious, but has talked to them and who did tell me flat out. He says I would put it at 95% the Nylander's traded. He said I really just because they really want to make it happen. It's not something that they're minorly doing. He said in the past they've investigated it, but this is a different kind of situation. Like there's no question that this is a different attitude coming out of Toronto, and that even as much as they've been playing it down, and they say, well, we're fine going in with all these guys. The other thing I know from a good friend, and this is a really kind of an interesting tell, that whether or not this means anything or not, who knows. I told you this, Mike, actually ages ago, was that I know somebody who's in the marketing department there, and he flat out said to me, he said, when we're doing all the billboards, all the pamphlets and all the things like that, we were told specifically right before the draft that Nylander shouldn't be on anything.
Oh, even during the season, walking into Scotiabank, they have Morgan Rielly, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander was not on it.
So they went specifically out. I mean, and that is always a tell, because there's no question that there's nothing more embarrassing than having a guy like on Saturday's ticket as Nylander on it or whatever, and then you have like.
I think they had to do it just to play it safe. I don't know if that's a real indicator.
This is a much harder deal for Tree Livers to make than even what Greer faced, because his team is bad and the Maple Leafs are good. So
I think he's better off signing him and worrying about trading him down the line.
That's what I think too.
They can't.
So
because he wants, because
he can.
No, they cannot.
No, he can.
They don't have the space
to afford him.
They'll figure out a way, Mike.
No, they won't.
It would really. I kind of agree with Mike on this, and I think it would be so damaging to them if they to figure out a way. They could figure out a way, but it would be damaging to them in other directions that have to do that.
That's what they may end up coming to grips with, because, like Kevin said, you can't just trade him away for a bad deal is a bad deal.
That's the whole point. We're not talking about trading him away in a bad deal. We're talking about trading him away for his value.
Okay, well, Mike, don't you think if a good deal was out there, they would have traded him already?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, well, that's what
Why would he hold him back? If there's a good trade, why in the world would True Living not have done it already?
Because he's for a better trade.
No, his value is.
It is what GMs do, Russ. You can't laugh at it.
No. It is what they do, but his value is definitely not where
it's getting late in the game.
No one in Toronto is going to be happy with this trade. I'll tell you that right now. Like that's going to be the
that's what I worry is the problem as well. But I agree with everything Mike says, though. I'm with Mike and Eck in terms of I would do it now, but I think it's going to be tricky. I was at the World Junior Showdown. A summer showcase, and they, there were some GMs there, and one of them said that he just heard the offers are not good for Nylander. He said they might get there, but he says you never know at the 11th hour. But he said right now, I heard they're not, nearly as good.
No, they're not, and they're not because of a lot of reasons, like and because first of all, they know Toronto is stuck. That's one of the reasons, right? They know Toronto is stuck. They also know that Nylander's been inconsistent. They also know that he's not signed yet. So there's a bunch of things so all those things are very nerve-wracking for a GM.
Yeah. And everybody's teams are pretty close to set. So, if it happens at the draft, it would have been better. So,
right.
If he was tell me why you brought this up to me. If he was a UFA, just pretend he was a UFA right now.
Right.
Would he be a guy who would have to be settling for a shorter deal?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Yeah. I think yes.
I would say yes too.
Okay, wait. You mean right
now?
Yes.
Yeah, he would have been. I think he would have been already. Here's the thing: if he's a UFA, he would have been gone already. I mean, that's the thing. He would have had a deal done already.
How many teams would have multiple dealed him?
Not that many. Not many teams had.
Not many, but I think somebody a good decent chance.
There's not that much money out there. That's the whole problem. Right. It's like next year when the cap goes up and a lot of salary is out there, he's going to get probably a 6 or 7 year deal. He's not going to get $10 million because he's not worth $10 million.
This is why Dumbo went to Arizona, because he knew
Right.
The writing was on the wall, and he wanted to get the most money he can, and he knows he's going to get traded at the deadline.
Right. Well, and you see, Dumba's deal is basically the John Klingberg deal of 2023. He went.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of when I heard the contract. It reminded me of him taking a quick shot in Arizona and then resetting for the following offseason.
Hopes that he can boost his numbers with power play times and things of that nature. And then when he gets traded, he plays well in the playoffs, and then he goes into free agency next year, and he hopes to hit it big when the cap goes up. It's a smart move by his representation. He's just got to improve on the 14-point year that he had in Minnesota, and a lot of people are doubting where he is in his career. But I mean, he has a big year in Arizona, then he can probably get a multi-year deal out there.
Yeah. So the chat room says Pittsburgh is the 12th favorite as far as the cup, and that means they think they're a playoff team.
They are. I think they are.
Well, they're a playoff team, but. Yeah, that makes more sense to me. That's just the point I was saying is it would be hard for them to win the cup, but I still like the trade. I mean, you got. I mean, they don't have any other options. You got to go for it.
I put something out there that I want to put out to the panel. That's not Nylander or Karlsson or Toronto related for a second, and that is something I put up. I was talking to people about this, and I posted it out there, and people had interesting thoughts on it. Are the Bruins a playoff team?
I think they're borderline. I mean, you go from Krejci and Bergeron as your top two centers to Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha, who aren't really centers. And you're hoping that, and now with the two deals that they just had to sign, the Frederick deal in arbitration and the Swayman deal, they have absolutely no money unless they can go out and trade Jake DeBrusk for a center. They're going into the season with those guys as their top two centers. I think they're borderline right now.
I think their defense is good enough and their goaltending is good enough that they're going to get in. But I don't. I think they lost a lot up front, and their ability to score goals is diminished. Although Pasternak is a quality player and can create his own offense from the wing. So
I'm still saying no. I'm going no. I said no last year, and I was wrong. A lot of people were wrong on that one. But I'm going to say no again because I think the job has now just gotten a lot harder to coach. I think because again you lost a coach on the ice. I do think they're going to struggle.
I think they're bubble. I think they are a bubble team. I could see, but again, it's one of those things where I feel like they need. If they can fish out and find at least some kind of a top six center somewhere somehow, but it's really, really, really tough. We had this conversation again. And Russ. About with Julian McKenzie. Lindholm, I think, is a pipe dream at this point for them. So
let's look at it though, just from the teams that are going to challenge: the Red Wings, the Senators, the Sabres. Mm-hmm. They're better than all those teams because of the goaltending situation and because of the defensive situation.
I don't know if they're better than the Sabres. I'm not willing to say that yet.
I don't know if they're better than the Senators.
Sabres have to prove now. Sabres are in prove-it mode right now.
They are, but I mean, just in terms of proven, they don't have the goaltending. Maybe they'll be there.
If Levi is a hit, they're going to make the playoffs.
But right now, I should be wearing the Riddler costume with the big question mark because that's the big question mark.
Yeah,
Levi
can do. If Levi can handle it as a 21-year-old, then they're a playoff team. But
but also look at Pittsburgh. You have to take Pittsburgh into the equation too. Okay, because if this is a conference playoff system. So Boston could. Is Pittsburgh better than them now?
Yes.
But this goes to back what I always talk about. Like everything that we've been taught about the NHL doesn't seem to be true. Like Boston's goaltending is superior, and yet we're wondering whether they're going to get in.
Right.
So and it's fair. It's a fair analysis of whether
What it is the East is crazy good, Kevin. Like I
agree.
It's not about Boston not being good enough to be a playoff team. It's about whether or not they're going to make the playoffs in the East.
But they have a solid defense. They have one of the top goal scorers in the NHL in Pasternak. Yeah. They've got Brad Marchand, who's difficult to play with and scores a lot of goals.
Right.
They've got some players, and they're up against teams that also have problems as well, just like they do. But I guess what we're saying is, centers are everything, and maybe they are.
But they're not just centers. Krejci and Bergeron are a lot. Those are two really deep parts of that team. You can't.
Although neither one of them was a premier point producing center. So
I think the Senators have better pieces, but I think the Sabres are more cohesive at this point, and that's why I like them better than the other two teams.
Yeah, I like Buffalo's defense. Yeah,
the Senators have a 1-2 punch up the middle with Stützle and Norris, and they could Kachuk on the wing. They're really good top six wise, and Batherson as well. But the Sabres, they've got a top line that was phenomenal last year with Tuck and Skinner and Thompson. You've got the young players who are coming along, and you've got the 1-2 punch with Power and Dahlin on defense. It all comes down to the goaltending with them, and whether they can play better defense. And that's a team thing, not just their blue line.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the teams in the East that were in the playoffs last year, I think Boston and the Islanders are the two that you have to say, I don't know. Like that.
And I mean, I hate to say this, but and I said this last year with Boston with all their injuries on defense and everybody concerned about that, and then they all came back early and they all played great. And Florida without Ekblad and without Montour, probably for the first 30 to 40 games, if they dig themselves a deep enough hole, they might not be able to be in the playoffs.
Right.
Possibly, but if they have those guys healthy, they could be easily in the playoffs. Like, I mean, the reality is, like last year,
that's the point. But
last year they showed that what they're about when they're healthy is a pretty freaking dominant team.
If you can survive the first 3 months of the season with Nico Mikkola being one of your top two defensemen, which he is right now, then yes, they have a chance. But I find it hard to believe that they're going to be able to survive without Ekblad and without.
It'll be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough.
Like a team like the Islanders will be right around the playoff bubble the whole year. They're going to be, because they have goaltending and they have defense, and they will be there the whole year. And if they score enough, they'll get in. And if they don't score enough, they won't get in. Like, that's how it's going to be with them.
What a different story there, huh? It's like
it's obviously the same
story.
Oh my God!
Well, the bottom line is we don't have any idea. Last year, I mean, it's just because these teams. I mean, X said it before. These teams are all pretty good.
I mean, if you put the Boston Bruins in the Western Conference, and I ask you, are they a playoff team? I would say absolutely.
Yeah. So
right,
no, they're all good teams. There's no doubt.
So, and that's not to say anything against the Western Conference, but they're Boston's a playoff team in the West, no questions asked. In my mind. But the reality is, there's only 8 teams. And there are at least 12 teams that are playoff worthy.
Yeah,
in the East.
I've told this before, but it's been a while, so I'll bring it again. I had on my save get key in the 1990s. If anyone remembers what a save get key is, I had saved, and whenever people would hassle me about my predictions, I'd say the only difference between me and a fan is I understand that I don't know who's going to.
And we see such vast differences. Like will the Devils continue on their progression upwards, or was that just a thing? Where are the hell are the Rangers?
So they should be heading upwards. They should be.
Are the Rangers? Is Tampa gone? For good.
That's a great question.
No,
Tampa's going to be the great unknown. That's a great.
Tampa's
question.
an unknown, but I think they'll still be right in it.
Vasilevsky, they're never.
Yeah, I mean they'll be in it, but I mean their depth is now like every year I've had for 3 years about the erosion of their depth. Well, now there's nothing there. It's just the guys they have. And they got to win with those, or if they get hurt, they're in trouble. I mean,
I'm sure Laviolette will give the Rangers a little boost. He always seems to do that in his first year. And someone like Panarin, if Panarin just scores like
he and Pino are like so alike in so many ways. Whereas the year one effect of Laviolette, the year one elect.
You'll get it. You'll get some of it.
Yeah,
you will. You will for sure.
Last year, Tampa Bay's fourth line was Perry Maroon and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. This year, it's Connor Sheary and 2 guys.
Right. Now, the last thing I'll say before we get out of here is the Team Canada investigation stuff seems to be really coming to a conclusion, right? And I mean, we haven't really seen anything because I haven't seen anything specific about it yet.
There's nothing concrete.
But I am hearing the teams are hearing what's going on, and I think we're at the point, like I said before, where some teams have a good idea. Like the NHL's given some teams the up and up, where this is where these players might be suspended, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything, Kevin, at all about this?
No, I haven't at all. I mean, not a single word. I mean, they've done a pretty good job of keeping that under wraps.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there's some stuff linking out that people are But the one person who said he had heard that there were a lot of suspensions in the air said he had heard it actually from a reporter. So
right, yeah, there's definitely wild. I just caution everybody about the wild speculation about suspensions and things like that out there, because the longer this goes, like in this stage right now, the more the rumors are going to get crazy. Because right now it's just, I'm hearing everything. Like I'm hearing.
Well, this is why they should put the news out, because they have the answer.
They have it and they know it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be, if there are suspensions, we're going to then be spending weeks, appealing those suspensions.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing. That is the biggest thing.
It's going to be very, very complicated. And the poor Players Association is going to be in such a horrible position.
They are.
Because they've got to defend their people. And this is not,
something you don't want to defend.
No, it's difficult. And, this is, it's just the nature of unions that they have to do that. So,
but without talking about specific players, I mean, okay, so something comes down and player X gets suspended for 20 games. Afterward, what is the value of that player? Because we've heard talk about certain players that might want to be traded from their existing teams right now. And I'm like, okay, if that team is trying to trade that guy, they're going to get pennies on the dollar for him because his reputation has been sullied because of this whole thing.
No, that's true.
So,
I don't know how much though. It depends. And listen, I'm not going to sit there and make any crazy excuses for anybody at all. But I don't know how much. I mean, it depends on what we know exactly from what players did what. Like, were players just in the room? Was that player's reputation going to be shot? Whatever? And I'm not saying if you're in the room, you're 100% comfortable.
No, you're right.
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying.
I think you can go with two things here. The teams that are, want the higher character guys are going to stay away. They're clearly going to stay away. That's their mantra. They're staying away. There's always teams that are willing to take risks. But if somebody's out for 20, they're out for 25 or more games anyhow, because they will need to get back in hockey shape. And so availability does become an issue too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. I don't have any. I haven't even been able to get a timeline for people. Like I haven't even said, are we in the next week? Are we in the next 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, again, you would think that they would want this out. Like, okay, August is dead. Nothing is going on. You would think they'd want to dump it on a Friday in August, get it out there well before training camp, allow these teams to, address like needs if the player is a key player in a key position. I mean, you would think they'd want to get this out. I mean, how long does it take for like the league attorney? Remember, Bettman said, well, the league attorneys have to look it over and things like that.
Yeah. He said that before the Stanley Cup started.
Right, exactly. And like how long does that take? You've got enough lawyers there, Gary. I mean,
there's some in the chat room that we missed, and we should bring it up real quick. The Tom Wilson deal. It is not a dumb deal. I think you have to look past what the dollar figure is and understand what he means to that team. And when Ovechkin is gone, Wilson will still be there. He's likely to be their next captain. So that's why Tom Wilson got this contract, because he's a bedrock guy for that organization, and they don't want to become unstable when all of a sudden Ovechkin's not there anymore.
Well, plus too, I mean, general managers have accepted the idea that they're going to be a couple of years at the end of a contract where the guy's not going to be the player, but they're doing that to get a lower salary cap hit. But fans haven't accepted that, and to be honest with you, I don't think the media has accepted that either. We just constantly talk about, but he's going to be, in his last 2 years, he's going to be a mediocre player. General managers have crossed that line. Like they just accepted that that's just the way it's going to be, because, while he's in his prime, they want more cap space to surround him with good players. So those are the kind of deals. And before we go, I wanted to bring up, sometimes in this business, we don't realize how popular players are. And I saw that yesterday with the death of Gilles Gilbert.
Yeah.
He passed away. He finished his career in Detroit for 3 years, but he's primarily known as a Boston Bruins goalie. He also played in Minnesota, I believe. But, is known as the goalie who gave up one of the most memorable goals in NHL history against Guy Lafleur. And what's interesting about that goal, and many of us have seen it on video, is, it's off the rush. Lafleur carries the puck in the zone, drops it or sends it forward to Lemaire, who drops it for him, and then he rips it in the net. And they have video of it from several different angles. And, back then, that goal was talked about as being just a brilliant shot by Guy Lafleur. Right. And to illustrate how the game has changed, if we analyze that goal today, we would blame it all on Gilbert.
I know.
We would just talk about, he wasn't set, he wasn't ready, he was off balance, so, whatever.
I think, Kev, the other thing about his popularity, I ran into him maybe 7-8 years ago at a card show, and I'm pretty sure he was lining up autograph signings for retired players. And I think that's another thing that kind of really kept his name out there, because I remember having a chat with him and kind of interviewing him about it. And I'm pretty sure he was making money for some players too. So that never hurt.
Yeah. Well, an overwhelming number of people read my story about him. I was just stunned by his.
Because you're the first one to say that people usually with nostalgia, it doesn't get great hits.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. No, I mean, we at Detroit Hockey Now, we've just made it a decision that we're going to write all obituaries of any former Red Wing player. And we just do it, even if they don't get, a lot of reads or not. But with this one, I mean, you don't really know how many people are going to read your story. But this one, it was incredible how many people read it. So.
But to your point, Kevin, somebody that I've met a few times up in Toronto, a former Leaf, Rick Vive, he was a 50-goal scorer, I think, 2 years in a row. More than 50% of his goals were just like the Lafleur goal, coming over the blue line, wind up, slap shot. It was because the goalie's equipment wasn't as big as it was. It just they were smaller goaltenders. I mean, there were a number of factors, but that was a very common goal in 1970, 80, 81. That now,
today we would say, "Oh, he's got to stop that." That's what we would say.
Yeah, I don't know who says that. I never heard.
I mean, I'll explain again how that happened. I tell the story all the time. On a Tuesday night, we always run to the televisions after the goal is scored. We want to see the replay. We want to see what happened. And usually we used to write down how they scored the goal. Where they were when they shot and the thing. And on this Tuesday night, we all figured out who was responsible for that goal, what defenseman got burned, who was out of place, who was caught up ice. And the reason we did that is for a couple of years, we had heard coaches had started to do that. No longer were they talking about a great offensive play. They were talking about a breakdown, where the breakdown came. And we changed because coaches told us to change, essentially,
Right.
And that's how it ended up happening. But, I mean, Gilbert actually had 3 30-goal seasons, had some good seasons with Boston. And with Detroit, he got on a very poor team, but he helped them. He gave them a chance to get into the playoffs in his final season, and they really had no business being in the race, and they were. Down the stretch, they had sent him to the minors of all things, and I read a story that online about how he said that he had a new philosophy, got down and made him rethink his game and why he liked to play, and he was going to do everything he can to get him in the playoffs. He almost did, but they fell short.
If memory serves, he had some sort of skin rash or something.
He did. Yeah. He had the gunk, as they called it back then. So, and he was dealing with that as well. But that was his final season. He was out of the league at 34. And he was done after that. But played a long time in the NHL.
Yeah, he was my first jersey I ever made as a kid. Like on a white T-shirt was a Boston Bruins Gilles Gilbert jersey. Like I just drew it with marker on. I drew the Boston Bruins logo on there and the marker and the one on the back of the Gilbert. That was the first thing I ever drew. The first jersey I ever had. I wanted a jersey so badly and I didn't have any NHL jerseys, so I made one. Yeah, and it was Gilles Gilbert. Crazy stuff. All right, folks, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.